CMMCS Intermarque's return to action at Brands Hatch in late September. An expected entry of 18 drivers would shrunk to 16 when unfortunately Philip Young and Volker Tim both had issues on their way to Brands Hatch. Despite this, there was still a very competitive field of cars which took part in qualifying, Daniel Smith taking the fastest time, ducking under the 50-second banner at 49.972. Next to him was Ian Hales, followed by the leading senior runner Paul Knight. Paul Spinks was next in an impressive fourth ahead of Dave York, and lining up in sixth position would be Colin Smith back in his Vauxhall Tigra for this event. Richard Smith would have a better run in his Mercedes, he would be seventh, ahead of Danny Russell, who was looking competitive in his Vauxhall Tigra, posting a time of 51.735. He was pursued by Ruben Taylor, Philip Blackford, Scott Aprigliano and Chris Ayling, returning to the championship in his Tigra. Sean Pooley was also getting quicker in his Volkswagen Corrado and he would line up next. Lewis Smith only managed 2 laps in qualifying before a front hub sheared, so he was further down the grid than expected, whilst Keith White was also in strife as his engine expired, making him a non-starter. Mick Robertson missed qualifying but was allowed to start from the back, whilst Blackford also withdrew. Race 1 had an unfortunate start as at Paddock Hill Bend 2 cars would disappear into the gravel trap, and as the dust settled we'd see red flags and we were missing both Spinks and York. Richard Smith had returned to the pits and unfortunately it would mean only 11 cars would take the restart. Daniel Smith edged into the lead with Hales in close attendance. Somehow Lewis Smith was already up into third position, followed by Knight, Colin Smith and Taylor. Although Daniel had carved out a 4-second lead, it was Hales who kept the pressure on. Lewis remained a further 4 seconds adrift, and he lost a place due to a track limits penalty, but would still hold on to third. Knight had a great race and he would finish 4th place. Behind him, Knight drove a fantastic race, taking 4th place on the road and also taking the senior class win. Whilst Taylor had got past Colin Smith for 5th, a great battle between the two throughout. Robertson had made steady progress throughout and he came home in 7th. Robertson made steady progress and he would come home in 7th position, right behind Colin Smith. Russell caught and passed Aprigliano with 2 laps to go as the Peugeot slowed. Despite this, Scott would win the driver of the race after a fantastic performance, and Ayling and Pooley would complete the finishes. Race 2 saw the first 6 finishers reversed, which put Colin Smith onto pole position. Sadly, we would have another first lap incident. This time, Taylor was tagged and sent into the gravel trap. The restart would see Lewis Smith grabbing the lead ahead of Colin and Daniel 2nd and 3rd. Within a lap, Daniel was into 2nd and closing down his brother. Lewis defended hard, and on lap number 7, the 2 Mercedes were side by side for virtually the whole lap. Eventually, it would be Daniel emerging in front, and he was slowly edged clear at the front of the pack. Behind, Lewis would see Hales looming in his mirrors, the white Mercedes becoming a little bit sideways, and Lewis picked up more track limit penalties. Ian kept his head down and put on some more decisive laps, and on the last lap he would take 2nd position on the road. Eventually, because of the penalties, Lewis would drop from 3rd in the finishing order down to 6th. This meant that Knight was promoted to 3rd, winning the senior class once again. Colin Smith was a very solid 4th, whilst Richard Smith had another good race to finish 5th. He was 2nd in the seniors. In 6th place would be Smith with his penalty. He was followed by Aprigliano, who had a consistent race to finish 7th, ahead of Robertson, who had a good race to finish 8th. However, because Mick had an incident under the red flags, he would eventually be disqualified, unfortunately for him. Therefore, Ayling would take in 8th and Pooley would complete the finishes in 9th, taking the Driver of the Race award. Unfortunately, less than 10 cars finishing the second race of the day, but throughout the whole day some great racing and some really entertaining battles that the crowd thoroughly enjoyed. Daniel now leads the series narrowly ahead of Lewis, and Knight will lead the seniors going to the final round of the season at Snetterton in October. Be sure to join us then for what will be a very thrilling season finale. Goodbye.